In one of my last videos, I think it was the one on the candle board, I mentioned in passing people who can block your spells. And I got an email from someone asking me to elaborate on that. So that's what this video is about. So I want to begin by saying, in that instance, when I said people who can block your spells, I was referring to your enemies, whoever you are, the viewer. Everybody has enemies. Um, but I'm going to expand on that and say I divide these people into two different categories. Um, One is magical people, and the second category is non-magical people, the muggles. So, magical people are people who practice any kind of magic. They can be um, root workers, hoodoos, people who practice voodoo, magicians, people who practice obia, any form of magic. And remember, non magical people can hire a magical person to um, work spells for them or against you. There's one more type of person I'm going to put into this category that they may not like, they may deny, uh, but we know better. And that is the prayer warriors. You may have heard this term before. So and so, she's a prayer warrior. And it's usually some little old lady. She sits at the front center pew in church, or a strong black woman, and they say she's a prayer warrior. What that means is she has the gift of prayer and praying. And what she prays for, she manifests. Men can be prayer warriors too, but it's usually women, more women who are described as prayer warriors. Because prayer really is a form of magic. And the ability to pray and pray effectively, and for what you to pray for to transpire, is a gift. You can develop it, but some people are more gifted than others. So those are the magical people. And so, how do these magical people block you in life? How do they block your spells? How do they block your success? Well, the first way they do it is through spells and counter spells. Of course, you've heard of people getting cursed, people having blocks put in their way. It's as simple as that. They work magic just like we work magic, they work magic. Sometimes it's consciously, sometimes it's unconsciously, sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's not so personal. For example, if let's say you're looking for a job and there's another person out there looking for a job, and you both want the same job, you don't even know each other. Uh, this person, they hired a root worker to do spells to help them get a job. You may be doing nothing. So while that root worker is doing their work to help that person get a job, not only are they working to help that person, but they're also working against you, unbeknownst to both parties. That's just business. In other instances, it may be that um, you like a certain person, and a third party likes that same person, and they know you do magic, or you mention that you're doing magic, which you shouldn't do. You shouldn't tell people. So while you're doing spells to make that person like you, this other person who likes that same person may be doing spells to put blocks in your path. They may be doing their own spells to attract that person, or spells to make that person not like you. Um, those are just some of the ways that magical people put blocks in your path. And then of course, there are counter spells, because if there's spells to put a curse on, there's spells to take curses off. And so it becomes sort of a battle of wills between you and your enemy, whoever they are. And one of the ways I taught in that candle board video was, one thing I do when I feel like there's some opposition. I don't do this every time, but when I feel there may be some opposition against me, if I'm doing, say, a candle spell, I will surround that candle with a circle of salt for protection, and then I would put one or two crystals near that candle to amplify its power. And that's one of the way I counter people who are trying to block me. Also, there are specific products in Hoodoo, such as Road Opener, or more specifically, Blockbuster, that you can do to where you open the roads before you, and then you do the spell for that you want your goal to manifest or accomplish. Now, non-magical people, there's really only one kind of non-magical person that I would really talk about today, and they work consciously and unconsciously, and these are people who are possessed of a strong will. They have great willpower, like the magician and the tarot deck. These people may think that magic and witchcraft is just a bunch of hocus pocus, but they have such a strong willpower. They are able to manifest things in their life through sheer willpower alone. Some people are born with a strong will, and some people are not, but there are ways that you can strengthen your will. And I taught a lesson in that when I did my year-long course in hoodoo, and maybe I'll make a video about it if people are interested in learning how to strengthen their will. And again, the people with the strong willpower, they can do it consciously and unconsciously. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of how people can exert their will consciously. And both of these examples are from fictional sources, but they illustrate how you can exert your will in the world. The first example is from, now growing up in our house, we only had one TV in the early days. Later on, we got more TVs in the house. But every day at 1 o'clock, like clockwork, you'll hear it, like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. The women in my family tuned in to Days of Our Lives, and they'd watch a soap opera. And on the soap opera, there was a character named Stefano DiMera. Now, he was a kind of James Bond type villain. He was always a sneaky guy, very magnetic, very charismatic, bad guy who would come up with these elaborate plans and ruses. But the thing of it was, they were sort of like one of those Rube Goldberg things, you know, where the ball drops and it rolls forward and it does something and that does something and that does something. And then at the end of it, it lights a candle. I don't know. Or maybe like a domino, a series of dominoes to where things needed to happen in a certain order for him to achieve his goal. So in this scene in my mind, it was such a powerful scene to me. It burned into my mind. One of his lackeys comes into the room and tells him of some setback to his goal. Something's not happening. And again, he needs things to happen in a certain order. And so that person leaves and he does his little monologue, but what he does that really struck me is he closed his eyes and he pinched the bridge of his nose and he said, "It will happen. It will happen. I will it to happen." Now, within the context of the show, he was probably visualizing what he wanted to happen or otherwise concentrating on what he wanted to happen while he was exerting his will. And sure enough, what he wanted to happen happened. Again, I know this is a work of fiction. I know it's a soap opera, but this illustrates how you can strengthen your will and exert your will into the world to make things happen once your will is strong. I'm going to digress here to also say this. I will be 47 years old in September of 2020, which is the current year. And I've been practicing some form of magic for about 30 years. And I can tell you from personal experience, the longer you practice magic and the better you become doing it, the less you actually have to do it. There are times in my life when something has happened and I said, you know what? This situation, this problem is unacceptable. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do a spell. And before I can gather my stuff or think of how I want to address it, it takes care of itself. Because I have exerted my will in the world. I have built up my willpower to the point where at times I can make things happen without the spell. And a lot of times spells, dolls, candles, and all that, really it's just window dressing because the real power is in your own mind. These things just sort of help you to believe and empower that belief to make things happen. Okay. So the second illustration is from a little show called Designing Women. And there was a character on that show called Suzanne. Now, I love Suzanne. Suzanne was crazy. She was like your crazy aunt that you weren't embarrassed of. She just said outlandish things and did outlandish things, but you loved her to death. And Suzanne had a maid on the show. You never saw the maid. Her name was Consuela. And within the context of the show, supposedly Consuela practiced some form of magic. I think they called it voodoo once in a while, but I don't want to say it was voodoo out of respect. But in this episode, Suzanne had been a beauty queen, and the beauty pageant, whatever, was doing some kind of accounting, auditing, and it come to find out that apparently years before in the 70s, Suzanne had actually not won the Miss Georgia pageant. She was the runner-up. And so they asked her to give up her crown in a ceremony to the actual winner. And she was real upset about this, and so off-screen, her maid, Consuela, told her to take a piece of paper and write on that paper 100 times, "It will not happen, it will not happen, it will not happen." And so her friends, her sister and Mary Jo and Charlene and Julia, took her to the ceremony, and lo and behold, it turned out the girl had slept with one of the judges and she got disqualified. And so Suzanne got to keep her crown. So while we're told not to use negatives in our affirmation, she said it will not happen. That statement was a very powerful statement for her. It summed up what she wanted. And this is something you can do. Take something that you want to manifest or to happen and boil it down to one statement. Make it brief but as specific as possible. And then, turn off the TV, turn off your phone or make it silent, turn off the radio, go to a quiet place, a receptive place, sit down with nothing but a piece of paper and a pencil, and write your statement down 100 times. Write it slow. Don't type it on the computer. Write it slowly and deliberately. Do it in cursive and really think about it and lock that seed in your mind, that seed thought in your mind. And if you want to, you could light a candle, maybe put out a glass of water for clarity. And when you're done writing that piece of paper, you can dress that piece of paper with an oil, smoke it in incense, and slide it under that candle till it's done. But that's something that you can do to exert your will into the universe to make things happen. And then afterwards you can take that piece of paper and put it in your Bible anywhere it says, "And this shall come to pass." That's one thing I do. And once it manifests for you, you can then burn the paper. Speaking of planting ideas in your mind, I want to go back to magical people and how they sometimes work. And this is something that I know a lot of magical people have been guilty of. I've done it myself, but I see it more and more in youngsters and young people, just threatening to put a spell on somebody. People are very highly susceptible to the power of suggestion, so just threatening to put a spell on somebody can make them believe that they are cursed. And so once you make that threat, everything bad that happens to them after that is no longer their fault. It's your fault because you cursed them, whether you actually did a spell or not. Actually, you cursed them without a spell by using psychology and the power of suggestion. I can tell you, there was one night I was sitting at home. I just happened to be on my laptop, and out of nowhere, I got an email from a very well-known root worker, an author. And it said something along the lines of, "I've never done anything to you. I don't know why you're working against me." And my thought was, and I told him, I said, I haven't given you a first thought, much less a second thought. I don't know what you're talking about. And they come back and said something about along the lines of, "Well, I know you're working spells on me and you're not going to get away with it. And I'm going to take care of it." So what he was doing was a form of black magic. He was trying to put the idea in my head that he was going to hurt me because he believed I was trying to hurt him. Now, in talking back and forth, what I gathered is he had gotten a reading from someone who told him that someone in the West was casting spells on him. Now, here's the thing. this person was in New York City. So everything west of New York City is basically the whole United States. So my guess is he probably sent that same email to a lot of different people, thinking he could sniff out whoever was doing this work on him, if anyone. Because I don't know who the reader was. The reader could have been somebody who didn't like me and was pointing this root worker in my direction because they didn't like me, for all I know. But what he was doing was a form of black magic, trying to put that thought in my mind that he was going to hurt me because he thought I hurt him. And that's, that's another way, using the power of suggestion. Now, going back to the people who have a strong will, I said they could do things consciously and subconsciously. So subconsciously, let's use an example of you work somewhere and for whatever reason you don't like your job. And you might mention to your coworker that you get along with this person, you like them, you don't believe they have any reason to not like you. You mention to them, I don't like the way things are going around here. There's no chance of promotion. They turned me down for a raise. I'm going to look for another job. And that person, outwardly, they're your friend. They mean you well. They don't want to hurt you. But inwardly, subconsciously, they might go, I don't want Dean to leave. I don't want Dean to get another job. I like Dean. I like working with him. I get along well with him. If he quits, well, ain't no telling when they're going to find somebody else to replace them. That's going to mean more work for me. And when they do find somebody, I'm going to have to train this person, and I might not like them. So they might, in their subconscious, think they want things to stay the way they are. So subconsciously, their will take over. And they can subconsciously block your efforts to get a new job. Like, you may send your resume in online and there's a glitch, they don't get it. You may get an interview but not get the job. You may have your alarm clock won't go off, so you're late for an interview and you give a bad impression for whatever reason. They're not trying to hurt you. It's just subconsciously they like the way things are and they don't want things to change. And so their willpower is drawing on those subconscious thoughts to manifest these blockages for you. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. I hope you liked this video. Hope you learned something. Please feel free to like it and share it across your social media. If you have any questions or subjects that you would like me to broach in a future video, leave it in the comment section, and you all have a great day.